Hi all. Good morning in Australia and good evening in US. I hope I hope all is well in East Coast in US. We have heard there's a lot of storms going on, snowstorms going on, but hopefully I think everybody and their loved ones are good and fine in this extreme weather. And thank you for joining us in spite of the snow and storm in East Coast in US. We have a very good attendance at this point of view time. I would also like to welcome Donald from Prudential, who is leading the IPA initiatives at Prudential Financial in US. Before we start, just a couple of hygiene factor, some ground rules here. All the attendees will be in the mute mode, and you can tweet about this webinar using hash MindSpeaksWebinar, and to ask your questions, tagging @MindfieldsGBL. All the unanswered questions will be answered via participants' Twitter inbox. All the slides and the webinar recording will be shared with all the attendees within the next 24 hours of this webinar. And I would again like to welcome all of you to this webinar. And today the topic is quite interesting and quite demanding. So as you know, we are a research firm also, and also RPA advisory firm. So we have got a lot of requests from the clients who are starting the journey that what's happening in the market. They're getting a mixed feedback regarding the success and failure of various organizations in the RPA journey. We at Mindfields are constantly helping the community and advising the community on how they can make their RPA journey more rewardful and successful. So I think the topic, key lessons learned from the Prudential's automation journey is quite relevant. Our objective is to make sure that we spread and we share the knowledge within the community. Mindfields is an advisory firm, and we are one of the fastest growing firm in Australia. Deloitte ranked us in top 20 fastest growing company in 2017. We have clients across US and Australia, and we have learned a lot in last 2 years of our clients' journey from ANZ Group to broad spectrum in the past. We have got various type of clients and who have shared their journey with us in the webinars. In this instance, I would like to welcome Donald from Prudential. He's leading the IPA journey for Prudential. I met Prudential about in November 2015 in New York. They were in the very early stage at that time, and they were trying to research on what is RPA, what are their clients doing. And I remember meeting them and sharing our research report with them. And that research report also helped them to start their journey. And now after 20 months after that meeting with Prudential, they are very well entrenched in their journey, and they are doing it right. So we would like to share their journey with all of our community. We want to educate and impart this education, how everyone can make their RPA journey more fruitful. So I would like to welcome Donald for his presentation and sharing his thoughts, how and why he thinks that his journey in Prudential in the RPA space is quite fruitful and how he has made this happen. So Donald has done various roles in Prudential, from client service, operations, strategy, sales and marketing. And during this whole tenure, he has developed a digital self-service strategies and capabilities. It has resulted in exponential growth of online visits and transactions. Currently, he leads the IPA solution and captive and COE. He worked with the internal business leaders to develop strategies that identify, prioritize, and implement automation opportunities. I would like to welcome Donald for this presentation. And in this webinar, we'll have a lot of polls also between different juncture of the presentation by Donald. Just to set the theme, I would like to understand from the participants that at what stage, at uh, what level of the RPA journey they are. So this poll will help us to set us the theme for this webinar. So the polls will be on the screen. And can you please answer this poll? It will be closing in 1 minute time. We'll share this with everyone. And Donald will then start his presentation on this basis. So here is the poll. At what stage is organization in the RPA journey? As per our research, like Donald is from operations background, about 33% of all the RPA initiatives in the organizations are led by a person from operations, mostly COO, or any person who has been delegated the responsibility for the operations. And about 12% it is led by CIO, and 33% led by, again, CFOs. So the operations is quite an important factor or contributor in anybody's RPA journey. So Donald, can I ask you to please, I would like to welcome you to start the presentation. In the meantime, we're getting this poll done, but I will appreciate if you can just start giving a brief background about yourself and the journey you have followed in Prudential.
Sure. Thank you, Mohit. And I'm really excited to be here and glad that the weather did not hamper me from being here. So at Prudential, we, as Mohit mentioned, we've been on this journey for since July of 2016. And the first question I think you have to ask yourself as you're going on this journey and you're thinking about RPA is you need to define why. Know your value proposition and let it guide you in this effort. So there's a number of different benefits that RPA can bring, and as I'm looking at the results, I see that we have a lot of people that are scaling up. We have some people that are researching in proof of concept, and also that we have some that have already gotten into production. So it looks like a very diverse group, but with scaling up being the largest. And I think from where we are right now, that's where we are. We are scaling up from our perspective to really roll out a lot of automations to the business.
So thank you, Donald. Just want to add one point here, as per what we have got from the polling result. Now, most of the participants are in 1/3 in the scaling up, where you are also. 2 years back, when we were starting the journey, our clients were doing more research. They moved to POC, and then they are launching into production. And most of them are now trying to scale up. So Donald, may I request you that when in your presentation cover this particular point of how to scale up and how you're doing it?
Absolutely. So can we advance the slide? I think one more. There we go. So as we're talking, as I started really around RPA, it's really having to define what are you trying to do? And for many of you, you've already done that, but I really wanted to touch on this because some people struggle to get from that proof of concept stage to the you have some automations going and really getting it to the next level. Really having to define what your value proposition is, and determining if you're interested in just simply assisting humans or building a digital workforce, reducing risk, reducing cost. When we looked at RPA, we determined that it could help us expand our continuous improvement solutions. It gave us another tool and another way of automating work. We also knew that this could bring improved accuracy, efficiency, consistency, and also help with data analytics and help manage our costs. These became critical as we were selecting selecting not only the tools that we were going to use, but also the criteria that we would use for processes. At Prudential, we have a shared service organization that supports 5 U.S. businesses. These shared services has a number of back office processes, but also has a continuous improvement capability. And many of the value levers that we identified from an RPA perspective had synergy with the shared service, and particularly continuous improvement. So we made a deliberate decision to align RPA in that organization, and in doing so, that we could drive business value more holistically across not just the shared service, but across the entire business units that these shared services serve. We were originally primarily focused to address work that already exists, as well as streamline resources and manage expenses and capacity. We chose to look to RPA to help us identify, what processes that we could, create demand with. And one of the areas that we also found was looking at sourcing opportunities. Since we were looking to instill a digital workforce, we really looked at what activities had already been sourced and also was in the pipeline for sourcing. Obviously one of the key drivers for us was that anything that has a digital, it would need to have a digital input and has rules-based decision-making was something that we wanted to look at. So as we look at RPA, in action, our value proposition was efficiency. And what we really looked at was efficiency and expense reduction, but we also recognized that RPA had much more than this. And what we really wanted to do is initially, as we were selecting our proof of concept, be able to show that in addition to efficiency, that we were able to deliver different value. And in fact, one of the initial things that we were able to deliver was something that improved customer experience. So in that situation, what we had is we had a contact center that would receive phone calls, and they had a whole lot of data about their callers, but they didn't have a way of going through and being able to recognize those callers that were repeat phone callers, and those callers that were repeat phone callers, they knew that they had bad customer service results from them when they were being surveyed. So what we were able to do from an RPA perspective was look at the call logs, identify those callers that called multiple times. So now the business had metrics and something that they could measure. But in addition, what they were able to do is the automation would update the call center's tool so that the next time if that person called, the call handler would be able to see that they were dealing with a person who had called multiple times, so that they would be able to help, they would recognize that this person needed special attention and be able to handle their call once and for all. Another one that we did was really around, creating that virtual workforce, and around payment, still on that slide, was really around payment resolution. So we had situations where customers would pay a different amount than the information they provided us. So there was a fair amount of research that went on looking at existing policies, policy behavior, and that. What we were able to do was automate those mundane tasks of that processors used to do, so that we could free them up so that they would be able to focus in on really things that mattered for them, and make that required judgment and human interaction. The final one that I wanted to touch on was we were able to defer some technology builds. So we've implemented some automations where two systems didn't talk to each other, and we were able to have those systems talk to each other. One of the benefits of using RPA in these situations is if one of the systems has rules already built in for a user, the RPA solution is able to leverage those rules rather than having those rules be rebuilt by a typical IT development. So I think we're up for another poll.
Yes, thanks, Donald. I would like to understand from the participant, what are their drivers for RPA? It will help us to also understand that what KPIs and RPA functions entails in any organization. So we have just launched a poll to understand what are the main drivers for the participants to initiate an RPA project or bring RPA in their organization. So it's on your screens now. So we'll close the poll in next 30 seconds. Um, so Donald, when you speak about your drivers, you have multiple shared services across US and offshore. What was your first port of call? Because for our other clients, they look at the captives first because they have mostly outsourced the mundane job to offshore or a captive centers or to a third party. So in your journey, was the shared service or the captives or the offshore function was the first port of call?
So it was actually all three. So we looked at the shared service activities, and we addressed them in that one payment one that I was talking about briefly. That was a shared service capability. But we have also looked at the work that vendors are doing, or in situations where right now people were doing it, but maybe a vendor, it was going to move to a vendor. So looking at those activities as well as an opportunity to identify where we could gain some efficiency. So I see the key drivers here are efficiency and reduction in FTEs. So very, very consistent with what I've seen from other people that I talk to, a lot around the process efficiencies, and obviously some of that leads to a reduction of FTEs. The other piece, which I see is almost 20%, is that enhanced customer experience, and that is something that we have found that more and more as we've matured, that becomes even something that more and more people think of, because it might be something that specific customers might have been wanting, some sort of special service. So looking to see how automation can help a business really be able to improve that customer experience. And as I mentioned, that was one of the first things that we had done.
Yeah, and I think same with us, our experience also, Donald, we have seen our clients to drive RPA for efficiency. The clients who focus on reduction of FTEs are not able to get the business case achieved, because in the first phase, there's a reallocation of FTEs, not reduction of FTEs. The FTEs might get reduced in phase 2 or phase 3, but in phase 1, it is reallocation of FTEs. And I'm surprised with this outcome of the poll, because we are seeing now our clients are coming to us for error reduction. When we are doing like regulatory reporting, the client wants errors to be reduced. That's why they're automating those processes. There's no FTE saving there. They don't want to have any error when they report to SEC or when they do stat reporting or stat audits. But it is quite interesting that most of our clients are moving towards now enhanced customer experience along with efficiency. So maybe in next phase, when our participants who are still in the scaling up phase, when they move to a scaled process or maturity has been achieved, they will start focusing on the customer experience. Again, thanks, Donald, for your views of lesson number 1 to identify how to start the journey. I will now request you to move to next slide for lesson number 2.
Sure. So when we start talking about finding synergy with other areas, for us, it really became down to attitude really mattered. And, attitude versus opportunity. But really, the attitude was so key. And I'll just give you 2 examples. We'll say we have the attitude champion team. They were engaged. They gave us a huge head start. Opportunities kept on coming in from that team compared to another team, and we'll call them, it was the flavor of the month team. This team was trying to wait for it to go away. They said, "Oh, we don't have any capacity." We did a first proof of concept and it didn't go well, so they really didn't want to pursue. We've made major inroads with that team, but really the attitude versus the opportunity is very important there. The other is really focusing on like-minded groups. So for us, the direct connection, as I talked about, was the continuous improvement capability. For some organizations, it might be a different group. It might be the PMO. It could be technology. And we are looking at RPA as an additional tool, in the toolbox for continuous improvement. And as we have matured and as we have expanded, we are recognizing that RPA is just one tool in the toolbox, and that everything doesn't require the RPA hammer. So if there are other solutions out there, we have begun to do some evaluation around them. But having that tool in the toolbox is very important from a continuous improvement standpoint. Talent opportunity is also something that we recognized as well. So, for example, we have project managers who it's been a great opportunity for them to work on something new. We've had business analysts that have become RPA champions in their own organizations. They wanted to be involved in technology, but they didn't want to leave the job that they liked. So this is really a great talent opportunity for them. And we had a really great experience. We are enabling business groups to get trained, so individuals within the different businesses to get trained. So we had one subject matter expert that was trained on how to develop these solutions. So she identified an opportunity where it was her work that she was going to automate. So she was an SME that was doing the work and was also developing the work. We matched her up with a mentor, and the results were fantastic. Not only did we get an awesome automation completed, we were able to really get employee engagement by that person and streamline the process of having the SME be right there to answer any questions. And as we mature, what we are beginning to do is really focus more horizontally than vertically. So initially, we spent most of our efforts just looking at a singular process. What could we automate? As we've matured, we began looking more broadly to identify similar activities completed in multiple organizations. For example, we're a financial services firm. There's wires that are completed all over the firm. So really looking at those wires activities and what can we be automating there. Control functions as well. So really being able to look things more broadly, more horizontally, so that we can make a more broad impact. So I believe we are up for another question.
Yeah. Thanks, Donald. And it's quite in line with our experience in the client side that it's a joint initiative. The clients which treat RP as an IT project or a business project solely always face issues when they want to go to a business or to IT to enable RPA. And so it opens up to another poll, which is how the different stakeholders or different departments in an organization are partnering for an RPA project or initiative. All the polls are confidential. We don't know what anybody is polling. So please don't be fearful that we're going to tell you IT department or business department that what you're voting for. So everything is confidential, and we can't see who is voting for what option. So please be comfortable. And I would like to share the result, and I would like, Donald, your comments. And I will also share my views, because I think the results are not surprised. You can see that it's a forced marriage or arranged marriage, I must say. I did have I had my arranged marriage. I'm very happy, but I think people need to start compromising at some level in their life. And I think IT department is well required in an RPA journey, because they have responsibility for IT security. They have responsibility towards apps. application, and any RPA tool which you bring into the environment, they have responsibility to make sure that security and they complied with their other policies and procedures and protocols. Likewise, business have got different drivers. They have KPIs which are linked to RPA. So they do have right to lead RPA initiative, but in the end, it's a joint effort. You are just like a two tires of a cycle or a scooter. You can't run without everybody's cooperation. So I think the results is quite obvious on the screen that it's a forced partnership, but we are seeing the companies where we have forced partnership are slow to get RPA results. Where the stakeholders are involved from the day one, both IT and business, we are seeing a better outcome for RPA. Donald, what are your views?
I find the poll results not surprising, and I agree with everything that you said. One of the things that we have found is, as we have evolved, the partnership has gotten better, and that improving that partnership really makes it very important from the standpoint of change management. And not people change management, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but actual change management. If you're not communicating with the technology folks on a regular basis, and it's not a collaborative effort where they're telling you, hey, these changes are coming, or you're telling them, hey, we have RPA that's touching these systems, and being able to work together, you're going to be surprised one day when a process doesn't work. And the process isn't going to work because somebody made a system change and the communication didn't happen. What we've done, as I said, it's evolved over time for us, but we now are on a release weekend where operations would usually come in and validate that the release worked for a normal systems change. We are now having the automations, the bots, run on a Sunday as part of a regular release weekend to make sure that nothing broke as far as the release, and that when we go into a Monday morning startup, that it's going to be able to process as we expect. So I think that good partnership is something that is critical, and the interest level that people have on both sides. I mean, because some RPA organizations are run by IT and some are run by operations, as you had mentioned. But once the people in the IT organization begin to understand what RPA is and what it can do, and also that it's not really going to mess up their system, it's just using it as like a person would, there's a whole lot of interest there. And you get a lot of ideas of what can be automated or what are some opportunities that they could be thinking of. So very, very interesting poll question there.
So Donald, just before we go to the next lesson, number 3, may I ask you one question that, since you are in the journey already and you have got a lot of process in production. So when the bots are in production, who is maintaining them, business or IT? Or both?
So we are part of the COE. So the COE has a development team, has a lead developer and developers, maintenance developers. We also have designers. And if there are changes required for something that is already in production, that maintenance team will handle those changes. So they will work closely with the business to operations to be able to understand what those changes are going to be able to make those changes in the test environment, and be able to validate those changes after a release.
Thanks, Donald. I think next, let's move to lesson number 3. So can you please throw some light on lesson number 3?
Sure. So the slide you're going to see next is really a high-level timeline of our process. And I wanted to share a lot of lessons learned from these different phases. And everyone, always asks, well, how long does each phase take? And the honest answer is, it depends. for example, we expected a short cycle time from design to deployment, but we've quickly learned that we needed more time. And the reason why we needed more time is we've run into issues that are really things that we weren't expecting. And we'll talk a little bit about them, but it's very important that these steps are completed. The speed in which you complete them can vary, and things can vary around complexity. It can vary by the systems. It can vary by business engagement. So all of those things will matter. But what's very important is that you have a process that guides your timing and resource demand, but it's flexible as you go through the learning curve. Priorities are going to shift, and resources are going to fluctuate. So pilot where you can, assess the lessons learned through every step, but build momentum as you're going through this to gain speed. So the first phase I want to talk about is really the identification and prioritization. And really, a lot of what this is really educating people on what work lends itself to RPA and the cost-benefit analysis. A lot of times we get ideas brought forward that really don't have the biggest business impact. It's more like nuisance tax. I got to do this report. Well, how long does it take you? Well, 5 minutes once a month. Well, it can be automated. The question is, should it be automated? And what we've had to say a lot of times is, no, there's really not that business value. So what you want to be able to do is have an opportunity and identification and prioritization tools that you can use to help make decisions in an objective, transparent way for your business partners, and that you can educate them of like what is good and what is not a good RPA candidate. And it's the other piece as you're going through this identify and prioritize is it's very important to define scope at this point. And that's one of the lessons learned that we found that I'm going to talk about as we get into specify requirements. So during this phase, we're using subject matter experts that reside within operations, and they're the ones that are going to be able to, explain the process that's clear, so that we can define requirements. They're the ones that are, fully understand the process. But it's very important that we're asking the right questions and asking questions about systems, and because a lot of times we can take information about systems for granted. For instance, how often does password changes occur, and does the system ever time out? Things that are very important for a bot that, from a human's perspective, may be overlooked. But one thing I want to say here is the more time you spend here and clearly define the process, the better the bot will run the process and the issues that arise, in later phases. But be careful of scope creep. And that's why it was important at the very beginning to define scope. What sometimes can happen is that scope starts to get expanded during this phase. What you really want to be able to do is define the scope, define the exceptions up front, and build off of that as you move forward. The other lesson learned here is while you're spending a lot of time with the SME, it's very important to keep management engaged, local management engaged, because there's sometimes that the SME will be very lost in the weeds, and that there is a need to, you're trying to design a process that gets to the same outcome. It doesn't necessarily have to have the same steps. So sometimes an SME, it's because they've been doing the job for so long, can be a challenge to get there. Which brings us to the next phase, develop and test. So in this phase, you're going to need systems access. And at least for us, getting the proper systems access has been a challenge. And part of the challenge has been because system access has been designed at an individual level, and really does not translate well to the world of RPA. The other piece that I think that people get hung up on is test. Don't get stuck in this testing process. Do your due diligence, know what the controls are in place in production, that you'll ensure that you're getting the results that you need. The other piece that I would say during this phase is making sure that you're developing this operational and contingency plan during this phase. And what that means is it's setting up the expectation for the business, for the operations area. This bot may call in sick one day. This bot may not process work one day. If that happens, what's the contingency plan that the operations is going to take in order to process the work? A very important piece, and once again, transparent that the bot isn't going to work all the time. So deploy and transition. And this is really around test and learn. It's starting small and scaling quickly. You start with a small amount of work in production and you do 100% quality review on it. You fix issues as they arise, analyze the process, build confidence, and increase the volume and decrease the quality review. It is so much like onboarding a new employee. When we have conversations with operations leaders and you talk about onboarding a new employee, they start to get it that you're bringing on a virtual worker, that this automation is going to do something that like a worker. And as a new worker comes out of training, it's not something that they would automatically be giving 100% of the volume and no quality review. So very, very important points to remember, that it's start small, scale quickly. And this is a high level timeline. It's going to vary based on complexity and other things, but just something that I thought would be beneficial for the group. I think we're up to the number 4. Or the final lesson? Yes.
So Donald, I would like to just comment a couple of things which you have covered in this slide. So we are also telling our client that humans are not immortal. Bots are also not immortal. They also fall sick. They will be replaced. They will get old. So all the RPA tools which we are currently using are very, very first generation of RPA tools. I remember using one of the tools 2 years back, which controls market share now. They did have password control. The passwords were not encrypted also. As they evolved, now they are talking about AI, machine learning. So we all need to have a plan B, because these bots will get retired very soon, very fast. So you touched the right point that you need to have a valid plan B or reverse transition or contingency plan for all the bots. So I would like to have one more polling question before we move to last lessons learned. There's a lot of talk about COE. Like we need to have a COE of RPA. We should not have COE for RPA. We should have COE for machine learning or for AI, or there should be a COE for digital operations. So different clients have got different views. And Donald, before I ask your view, I would like to open this poll in which I want to ask all the participants to let us know their view whether COE is important for RPA or it can be postponed to next 6 months before you start scaling up. So Donald, can you let me know your views on COE? It is required, or for example, you are a multi-location, multiple country organization. So what are your views on having a COE?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we do have a COE. We explored different setups as we were evaluating how best to set up, and we landed on the COE from the standpoint of, at least initially, it gave us a great opportunity to be able to control the design of the work, control the development of the work, control the way the work was handled in production, implementing the change management standards. So we've been able to really define the structure. One of the things that we want to be able to do is enable businesses to do it. So we're looking at doing that, but feel that it's very important that we're not an organization that has multiple of the same tool types throughout the organization, because I think that becomes inefficient and can be confusing. So really having those standards, having the standard process, and has been very helpful to us.
And Donald, you can see the results on the screen. So I would say half of them want to have it, and 42% are still evaluating the options. It means they are still in the stage before they start scaling up. I think for the companies which are at your level, at your scale, it makes a valid sense to have a COE, to have standard operating procedure before you automate a process, and post automation, how you maintain your bots. So for all those requirements, you need to have a standardized or hybrid model of a COE. So I think it depends upon the size, scale of any organization before they can move to a COE model or an RPA. But I think it is a requirement for every organization who want to take an RPA journey to do a knowledge management of the script writing, the standards for coding, the process for selection for the RPA, and also when you do testing. So all those steps which you covered, Donald, in the previous slides can be properly controlled if you have a standardized COE setup. So I think I agree with you and your views on that point. So now moving to the lesson number 4, the last lesson. So Donald, please walk us through your last lesson.
Sure. And I think this ties back to really your first question, is recognizing that this is a journey. We have different people at different stages along the journey as we on this call. But even as you're going through this, it is a journey. And you talked about RPA. You talked about intelligent process automation. So there's more and more things that are on that path. The key from my perspective, what I would like to share is, take your time, be patient, and stay the course. At Prudential, we were lucky that we had this group that was coming up with ideas, and it was like this. So the third generation of ideas really was part of this transformation initiative, at Prudential. There was a lot of rigor around the program. You had a senior exec sponsor. Every initiative in the transformation was evaluated and challenged. And what this was able to do was really get us the executive support that we needed, and was able to put some wind in our sails to increase the likelihood of success. So that backing was very important. Some other things that we really, I think were important was, it was in order to be effective, still on the slide, and at managing the change, we had to be clear what the decision was to pursue RPA. You're going to do for people that are still in that evaluation, that research phase. You're going to have to do due diligence. You're going to need a project team to look at your tool selection, your technology requirements, all of that stuff. You're going to need to have a business case, and that business case and other decisions, as far as we talked about before, is why, will be part of the communication, the engagement plan, and really the change strategy that you're using. And one, really important here is, think big, start small, and scale quickly is the foundation that we built on. As this slide shows, in July of 2016, the COE was formed. October was the first automation in production. We had a number more by the end of that year, and we put a ton more last year, and we're still scaling, as I mentioned. it's very important, the communication around RPA, though, and and we're going to talk about it a little bit more on the next slide. But we're really driving a culture shift, and part of that culture shift is test and learn. It all doesn't have to be done at once. We can start small, add on, some exceptions, drive new ideas. All of these things are a change in mindset and a shift for our organization, and something that we still are managing every day. Next slide. So, the organizational change management is similar to any efforts that large organizations have as implementing change. You need strong leader support, as I mentioned on the prior page. It's like a simple question: why would any team do something different unless there was a call to action by senior levels? As I mentioned before, we had one group that I would say they thought it was the flavor of the month. They were waiting for it to go away, and then once they realized it wasn't going away, they bought in, and they bought in big. Having a multimedia communication plan, meetings, what RPA is, what it's not, emails, lunch and learns, intranet, videos. We found videos to be an excellent tool to help increase the understanding of RPA. In particular, those videos that showed the bot sending an email were the ones that made the robot real. Because a lot of times you just see a cursor flying across the screen. It doesn't really look like much. But once the bot's sending an email, stakeholders get to see that people will be receiving an email from a robot. And if the email, if it has an email account, in our case, the robot has to have a name. So we had people naming their bots that they were going to use. I mentioned videos, and I think videos are a lot better opportunity than a live demonstration. Videos don't fail, and a live demo can. Testing environments could be off, all kinds of variables there. The other benefit there is you can edit out any waiting periods from a RPA is forced to wait because of the underlying system. That would just bore people, and the other thing is videos can be posted on an intranet site for people to look at on their own time. So, the other key is really preparing for ambiguity and flexibility. It's that test and learn and being able to adapt and move quickly. Engaging key stakeholders early, often, business leaders, project management, technology, security, risk management, making sure that you have good relationships, partnerships with these areas, and really being able to have them understand what RPA is and what it's not. And the more they understand and the more insight that they can give, I think the better, the better the relationship for one, but the better product that you have at the end. And then the final thing is, it's not a technology solution. It's a virtual worker. We really need to address the need to manage the virtual workforce. So it's not necessarily like a lot of automations from technology. It's probably closer to a sourcing model. So it's a little bit different, obviously, than managing humans, but it's something that, as part of the change management, you need to address and make sure that everyone understands what their roles are in managing the work.
So, Ronald, thank you for all your insights. I just want to cover we have 12 minutes left in this webinar. The last polling question, which I want to cover, and I also want your views on that what's the target operating model? Are you use in-house skill team or using outsourced to vendor, a combination of both? Or and we have also got a couple of questions in the chat box from different participants. They've asked that, have you engaged a third-party consulting firm in your journey? If yes, for what purpose and objective? And what has been their contribution? Number two question which has come is that why you just told that your POC failed, the first POC. So what were the reasons behind that? So these are two questions. In the meantime, when people are polling on this poll, can I have your views on those two questions?
Sure. I'll touch on the POC one first. So it failed because it was a very complex process, and it was a very complex process that was not clearly defined for every situation. So it was creating the need for 100% QR, because there would run into a situation where the business rules weren't clearly defined, and the bot would process it based on business rules which were agreed to, but ended up being something different than the way it should have been. So the reason why we pulled it was delivering no value. It was, doing a couple cases a day, not really creating that much efficiency or time back to the organization. Every case needed to be reworked, and it was very complex. So looking at it in hindsight, we made the assessment. It wasn't something that we probably would have automated from the very beginning. Once again, what's the business value for the work effort? So in that test and learn, we were able to say, you know what, this isn't something that we should continue to support, and we stopped it, and everybody was happy with that decision.
And second question on. Yes. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the second question was around, did we use any consultants in this process? Was that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. So we did initially to help us establish the COE. We used some consultants to help us be able to define some of our standards, and we've evolved over time. But yes, we knew we weren't the experts, and we requested some assistance to help us in the establishment of our RPA COE.
Okay. Thanks, Donald, for that. And we are seeing our clients also using us for some initial start off, and then we are training our client to do it themselves. So we believe that RPA is not a rocket science. So what we are doing, we are sharing all the templates with the client so they can take the journey themselves going forward. I would also like to share the result of the poll on the screen. Donald, your views on that, the outcome of the polling?
Yeah, so we're very, very similar. We have a combination of both, in-house and outsourced individuals that are supporting the COA.
Okay. So, Donald, thank you for your time for this webinar. I would like to now move to a section in which we have got questions from the participant. Some of the questions have been sent to us over the email over last 2 or 3 weeks. But before that, can you just wrap up this webinar and focus on the key points as per the slide mentioned here?
Sure. So real quickly, I know we're almost out of time. So the one thing I wanted to mention, the key points: development staff. Be wary of the hype. Coding is coding, and technical skills are needed. There's a high demand for RPA developers, and ramp-up time is longer than normal. So you really need to make sure you're lining up the right partner, in doing that. Security and controls. I touched on this before, but I have to do it again. We have a complex application environment, complex security environment. That has been one of our biggest challenges, is getting the appropriate systems access for not only development but production as well. And the final thing is around testing. Part of the configuration is the testing environment, making sure that this SME is engaged along the development process. So showing the SME how the bot is progressing, so that when it is time for testing, they're not surprised, and that testing phase can go very quickly.
So, Donald, I just want to add one more point. When you told that why your POC failed, Like we are seeing the same thing. So what we are saying to our client, try to automate the gain area, not the pain area. Because when they start focusing on the pain area, they will pick the complex process in the first phase of the journey, and the chances are that they will fail. Because in the first step, when you're crawling, you're trying to run also, so you're going to fall. So we recommend our client to look for the areas which give them more gain, so they can self-fund the RPA project going forward. Then looking for the pain areas to automate, which are very, very complex mostly. So I think we are in line with what are your views and what your experience has been. So I will now try to move to the last slide, which is about the question and answer. So we have received a lot of questions through chats and through emails over last 2 to 3 weeks. So some of them are mentioned here, but I would like to pick one which we just got in the chat. So Donald, we have got one question that while reviewing the process for RPA, you often see a yes, but answer. You can automate, but only if you also make some other changes to the process. What has been your experience and lessons learned on how to deal with other adaptations and reengineering that emerges without allowing scope creep into trying to do too much in one go?
That's a great question. And I think for us, I mentioned a few times, our alignment with the continuous improvement organization has helped us there to be able to tweak a process in order for it to be automated. One of the areas that we are looking at right now, we are looking to do a pretty big change to their process. But the reason why we're doing the change to the process is so that we can bring in data digitization into the process. So that would be the front end for RPA. And the reason why we were willing to do something like that is because of the benefit associated with doing that. The quality improvement, the efficiency improvement. There's a lot of there's a lot of value there in that process. So you may be willing to have the scope increase a little bit if the value's there, but we have made small tweaks to processes, working closely with the with these local management in order for the process to work. And a lot of that has really been around how work is flowing to the bot, moving away from potentially work that is not data digitized, having it placed into a worksheet, having that worksheet in a shared drive, different types of activities that we've done that while it is a change in process, not really a massive change in scope. But where we have run into problems with changes in scope is, could it do this too? Could it do that? And from what was a very fine-tuned process is now something that has a lot of tentacles to it. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. So Donald, I think you're right, and that's why whenever we go to any client, some of the clients talk about re-engineering, or we using Lean Six Sigma, getting black belt resources to help in automation. What we tell to our clients that we have to make the process enabled for automation. And Lean Six Sigma, re-engineering are just some steps to be taken to enable them for automation. When you automate a process, you might have to add more extra steps in a process for security, for control, for audit. So using Six Sigma or Lean principles for automation, it is not valid or required all the times. It might be required in some instances, but not in all the instances. So what we say to our client is automate, re-engineer your process to enable them for automation. Don't try to over-engineer it, because then you lose the business case for automation also. Because if you involve Six Sigma people, they're very expensive. The whole initiatives the ROI goes down. What are your views? Do you involve Six Sigma Lean professional in your automation journey?
Yeah. So with the continuous improvement that we do have Lean and Six Sigma folks that we call upon, but I think that the way you addressed it is absolutely right. To do something from an automated and using a bot for a process may change the overall process, and it could be a different process for the bot than it is for the people that are doing the same work. You just have to recognize that and try and make it as efficient as possible. And once again, looking at it holistically as the overall value that is being embarked on an area.
Thank you, Donald, for your presentation, sharing your knowledge and sharing your experience with the whole wider community. And it aligns with your slide that you have to share your knowledge in the community to learn more. And I'm sure that you have also gained a lot from such webinars or some such events in which you were invited, where you have shared or listened to the other people's journey. So I think it's in a community we need to have this education, which is not linked to a sales pitch, to enable all the participants and all the organization to succeed in their RPA journey. I really appreciate and thank you for your valuable time and insights which you have given to all the participants today. And this webinar is recorded, so it will be on the website. We'll send the link to everyone who have but not be able to join due to weather conditions or time zone restrictions. We have a lot of followers in Singapore, India, UK, who always complain to us that we are favoring Australia and US. But I think we need to compromise somewhere in the time zones. So this is the optimal time which we have got to address our followers in Australia and US, which are bigger market for us. But I think there are a lot of questions unanswered in this webinar. So Donald, we will take your time through emails for those questions to be answered. And participants, please feel free to contact us and we'll pass your questions to Donald. And as always, we'll be having more webinars going forward, and we'll announce you for the next webinar very soon. Thank you all of you for joining this webinar. And thank you once again, Donald, to make yourself available despite of all the weather condition in your place.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again, Donald, and thanks all for joining this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.